Good evening, everybody. On behalf of the Paley Center's Los Angeles Board of Governors, I'm delighted to welcome you to the second event in a new series of Los Angeles Paley Media Council Dialogues. It's great to see so many of you, trustees of Paley, my fellow board members, and media council members, and many of you who are perhaps here for the first time. We welcome you, and we encourage you to get involved with the Paley Center, become a member of the Media Council, attend other events like this, both here in Los Angeles and in New York, where you will be in very good company. Tonight we are in very good company. With a special guest, I now have the pleasure of welcoming to the stage. David Nevins is one of the most respected executives in the entertainment industry. As president of Showtime Networks, David is responsible for developing, acquiring, and supervising all aspects of programming for all of the Showtime Networks channels across all genres, including comedy, drama, reality, specials, documentaries, and films. He also manages Showtime Sports and the company's marketing, creative, digital media, scheduling, research, acquisitions, home entertainment, business affairs, and corporate communications. I'm out of breath, okay, with this, okay? He's a very busy guy with a further responsibility as the liaison to CBS international and domestic distribution groups. I love his programming. I really love his programming, okay? Under David's leadership, Showtime has launched 8 consecutive hit series, including the critically acclaimed Ray Donovan and Masters of Sex, as well as Homeland, Shameless, House of Lies, The Affair, all of which rank among the network's top-rated shows. The first project he greenlit at the network, Homeland, was the recipient of the Golden Globe and Emmy Awards for Outstanding Drama Series, as well as the prestigious Peabody Award. Hosting him in conversation this evening is accomplished editor and writer Stacey Wilson Hunt, who was named New York Magazine's first ever Hollywood editor in October after serving as awards and special projects editor and senior editor at The Hollywood Reporter from 2010 to 2015. While at The Hollywood Reporter, Stacey oversaw all of the trade's Emmy and Oscar print coverage and wrote multiple high-profile cover stories. She was also the moderator of the Hollywood Reporter's Emmy Roundtables series, which aired on Sundance TV. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm welcome to my fellow Paley board member and a terrific executive, David Nevins, and Stacey Wilson Hunt.
This is not my good side.
And I want everyone to know I coordinated with the chairs tonight. That's how dedicated I am to this endeavor. Thank you for being here. Thank you, David. And I can safely tell you with no guile, I watch every single show on Showtime, and I'm not lying, and they're all great.
Don't test me.
I won't test you, okay. So before we get into the nitty-gritty business part of your life, I would love to know, when did entertainment become something that you care about?
Me personally?
Yes.
Well, I mean, it was probably pre-verbal, you know. Yes, I've been watching television since I was 2. It was, I think, like Baby Einstein came in a generation after me when the idea was like, you know, the idea of showing television programming to infants. But I don't know. I definitely remember early Sesame Street. Is that the question you're asking? But I definitely started watching it at a really young age.
And then when did you know you wanted to do it for a living?
I knew I had this idea. It was sort of relatively late in college where I wanted to be in a creative business. I always loved movies.
Did you want to
Actually,
write?
always loved movies. No, I didn't want to write. I didn't know what I want. In fact, I definitely didn't want to write. Okay. I knew that for a fact. But at some point, I really discovered a love of movies, you know, 15, 16, 17. It never occurred to me like as a business. But then sometime in college, I decided I wanted to be in a creative business. And I went to East Coast Liberal Arts College, Amherst College. And it seemed like the most creative business I could possibly be in would be the advertising business. Because that was, you know, they recruited on campus, and you know, you could get a job at the what's the big Chicago, Leo Burnett. You know, Leo Burnett would come interview on campus. And I had like no particular feel for advertising, but it seemed like a creative business. And then I went away my junior year to Glasgow, Scotland. And in Glasgow, I fell in with a bunch of really hardcore film geeks who would have given...
I thought you were going to say thugs after that.
No, they were like lovers of American movies who really... they would have given their right arm to move to Hollywood, and I realized I had no immigration problems. So I could just drive there and see what happened, and that's what I'm still trying to get to the movie business, but TV is the place to be right now.
Well, you're well on your way. And who would you say gave you your first big break in the business itself?
Well, my first big break was definitely a producer named Louis Chesler, who made a show called The Hitchhiker in the very early days of pay cable. Sort of back before pay cable was the cool place to be, but was making sort of a show for HBO, and then HBO, I don't know what happened, but HBO got rid of it and it moved to USA.
I remember
The Hitchhiker was like sort of Twilight Zone with a little bit of nudity.
Like Kung Fu, too, a little bit.
Yeah, filmed in Canada. And when it moved from HBO to USA, it suddenly lost its nudity. So there was suddenly became a little more pressure on the writing. Anyway, that was my very first job.
Good auspicious beginning. And
then Warren Littlefield, who's sitting right there.
right, yes, he is.
That was actually like my first break into mainstream mainstream television. And when the idea first came up of going to NBC, I was like 25 or maybe probably 25, and I was trying to figure out how I was ever going to get out of like, you know, the sort of early days of pay cable, late night softcore, you know.
Right, Elvira.
Like how I was ever going to get to mainstream. And I had sort of like quit and gone to Europe, and Brian Pike left. Kevin Riley was moving up from like director to vice president of drama development. I had been involved in this crazy pilot, and I think kind of benefited by being the only sane person, this kind of insane pilot. You probably don't even remember what it was. It was called Crimes of Desire or something like. Had some very purple.
It was pretty bad.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. And I had no concept of how bad it was because I had nothing to compare it to. And at that point, honestly, I wasn't really watching television, so I didn't realize how bad it was, how not in contention it ever was. It was, but out of that, they said, like, do you want to come and be director of drama development at NBC? And I went, like, for a few days, I was like, I don't know. I don't want to be a suit. It's not really the path I see myself. I don't want to be, you know, and it was like I was an idiot. So I finally, you know, I said I would consent to be. And I didn't realize like how lucky I was that I kind of, development is where you wanted to be. I didn't know that, and I sort of like had skipped past the current department, which was not necessarily where you wanted to start. And so like, it turned out to be a great situation. NBC was like right there, like,
it was a good time.
Warren had just taken over for Brandon, and we were in third place, and then very quickly we went, you know, things started happening very quickly, and that was a very fun time to be there. There's nothing, Warren used to say this to me, which I didn't appreciate fully at the time, but there's nothing like being at a network on the rise, and it's true.
Very, very true. And I look back at all the shows you either had something to do with as a producer or helped develop, and it's ER, West Wing, Will and Grace, and then from Fox on to Imagine, 24, Bernie Mac, Arrested Development. It's rare to see a resume that doesn't have a lot of bad shows on it.
Well, we crossed them off. That's what it's not. It doesn't mean that they're not there. They just don't make the resume.
No, I got this from a reputable source called Wikipedia. It's very, very reputable.
But again, it's been well scrubbed. I can.
But still, it's.
I can tell you some pretty, you know, I was the guy trying to convince George Clooney not to do ER. You know,
What was your reason for that?
because I had another pilot I wanted him to do.
And he'd been on Roseanne. He had done comedy.
Yeah, he had his deal at Warner Brothers, and we had this pilot. Again, I don't know whether you remember the story, but we had this show called Golden Gate about like two brothers or something, one of whom was a cop and one of whom was a lawyer. And I was like, one of two leads. Why do you want to do this show where you're like one of 7 leads? He's like, I don't know. I think I can score in that part. And I was like, I think you're making a huge mistake. He's like, yeah. That was.
We're glad he didn't listen to you on that.
Yeah, yeah. He rubs that one in. But it's like, you know, it's idiotic. I didn't know anything.
Well, everything worked out the way it should have. And when you look at all the shows you've worked on and helped to bring to light, is there a common thread among them? I guess I'm asking is, what is your aesthetic at the end of the day?
I think so, to some degree. I mean, there's certain things I tend to like. I like big, messy shows. I like, you know, I would say kitchen sink shows. It's about this and about this and about this. Like the very pure, simple concept, I tend to get bored with. So I like, you know, shows with multiple ideas. You know, Arrested Development there's like 6 different ideas in it. It's about adult siblings trying to get together. It's about, you know, a riches to rags story. It's about, you know, white collar corruption and the effect afterwards. It's about, you know, it's got like 16 ideas. When we were brainstorming that show, there were like 16 ideas, and eventually the show incorporated all of them. Same thing with Homeland. It's a kind of big, sprawling show, goes in a lot of different directions. Same thing with Ray Donovan or ER or even The Affair, which started out with a very tight concept and is getting more sprawling. And I'm always pushing it to get to go in more directions. So I tend to like that. I like shows that have, you know, character depth and unexpectedness. And I mean, I do think, you know, even look at the shows as a producer, what do Friday Night Lights and Arrested Development and 24 have to do with each other? They're very different shows, but they're kind of sprawling. They're kind of fast. They kind of are, you know, I've never been good, even though I like really admire and loved as a viewer Mad Men. You know, there's a certain meditative quality to it that I would never do very well, and I would get impatient. I would ruin a meditative show. And that was, you know, truly one of my, you know, top 2 or 3 favorite shows of all time.
But it's interesting to think the public was not ready for Arrested. It didn't last very long on broadcast, and it was so great that it had a second life on Netflix. But I think at that time, which was I think 2001, 2002, those types of shows, those multi-layered, what is this show, is sort of what everyone was asking. Yeah. I think America wasn't ready for it.
Yeah, well.
Which is interesting to think back on that era. We think it was recently, and actually things have changed so dramatically since
Arrested
then.
was my first connection to Showtime, because as Fox was, you know, having, you know, it was clear they'd had enough of the show. Showtime made a really aggressive offer to pick the show up. I don't know, and it gave they were offering sort of all the freedom that you know, that we didn't have. Like you can do it. You can do 10 episodes one season. You can do 12 episodes another season. You can do, you know, you can do 23 minutes. You can do 29 minutes. Because a lot of what was painful about Arrested Development was always cutting the episodes down to 22 minutes. And for a variety of reasons, largely deal-driven, it never quite came to be, and it was one of the great professional regrets. And you know, Netflix gave it a new iteration and brought it around. But I mean, the show was clearly already still living, you know, and it was a show that. And
it found cult following.
And it found cult following. Yeah. So many generations after the people who saw it first on Fox had already found it. Right. So it was always a great regret that we never made the show for Showtime. And it was really my first encounter with Showtime. And you know, a lot of the same people are there. I never even talked about, Melinda's here somewhere, Melinda Benedict, who's probably the one making the offer. Anyway.
We've done well despite that.
We screwed that one up, though.
And you mentioned you like messy shows, and Homeland was something that came to light around the 10-year anniversary of 9/11, and I know that a lot of people felt were divided on it. And this season, I think, has actually brought more of that out with recent events. It's sort of been so heartbreaking for everyone, and it's difficult to even watch the show, I think, and yet I still do because it's good. But I wanted to ask you, how much realism is too much in the time we're living in?
I don't know. I mean, it's not, the trajectory of Homeland, it seems to me, like, had a brilliant sort of initial idea and like a great sort of holy shit premise. There were no, based very loosely, because there was no Carrie Mathison character, based very loosely on an Israeli show, which was really about what's a resonant story in Israel. POWs in Lebanon come home 10 years after. In that case, there were 4 of them. Four characters who come home, and it's really just about the re-entry of people who've been away from society. So it's sort of a tragic Rip Van Winkle story. One of them turns out to be a ghost, but the American version, you're going to find a POW missing. If we find a POW in Iraq or Afghanistan, it's an anomaly. I mean, and since the show was created, we have found Bo Bergdahl, and that's going to. Right. I feel like that's a big story that's about to happen for 2016. Yeah. Is like what the real story with Bo Bergdahl is, and that's very much, But they knew when they would conceive the show, if we're going to find a POW, it's going to be an anomaly because people who get captured get killed. Right. In those wars. So this big high concept that they then teased really brilliantly, and how long can you go? I mean, in fairness to the producers, their very original idea was a 1-season bad guy, I said we can tease it out longer, we can make it more ambiguous. Is he a bad guy? Is he not a bad guy? What's going on with Carrie Mathison? So, so I know that some people felt like we played it out too long. Some people stopped watching the show after Brody left. So there's, you can't please all the people all the time. But then as soon as Brody left, I knew it was, I think we all instinctively knew, Alex, Howard, knew, like, they hadn't really written the true spy story yet. So we've got this great franchise, let's tell like a spy story and and make it reflect the world that we live in. It's not Homeland. I mean, it's not 24 where it was the CTU. It's like the CIA. We're really doing the CIA. So Alex spent a lot of time doing a lot of research. And I think what's happened to a certain extent last year, although it didn't hit as close to home, and definitely this year, is they're hearing from various experts at the CIA in a 3-week research trip they took in each of the last 2 Januaries to DC. What are the things that are keeping the national security apparatus up at night? CIA, some former CIA, some NSA, some State Department people, like what, and I think what happened this year is just an amazing feat of synthesis, which is a lot of what the CIA tries to do. But, sometimes Hollywood writers do it better, which is, Snowden. So, there are very strong privacy laws in Europe that used to get papered over by the NSA and American intelligence, saying, because, doing more electronic surveillance, Snowden really compromised our ability to do some of the electronic surveillance we were doing. So that's going to create some problems. Putin, the people, the sort of people focused on Russia. Putin, very uptight about, is going to get more assertive in Syria because he wants to take the pressure off and the focus off of the Ukraine. The U.S. and Israel usually pretty much in lockstep, not exactly on the same side on how to handle Assad. Israel kind of like, let's just leave him in place. America, like, he's got to go, and Europe, he's got to go. So weirdly, Israel and the Russian. Anyway, they synthesized all that into a story, which, as you know right now, leads to an attack on Europe. And a lot of the themes and, coming out of the privacy is exactly what happened. And that's what's so kind of eerie and upsetting and unintentional about it. But they heard this, and they heard this, and they heard that, and they put it all together into this story. And it's remarkably similar. What they posited for Berlin, also sort of, Europe's, difficult relationship with immigrants. And, there's the immediate immigrants from Syria, and then there's the larger sort of Islamic communities that in the big European capitals. And it's kind of uncanny.
It is. And I spoke to Alex last year at some point, and he said that he'd been asked.
I wanted Alex to do this. It would have been, but he was like, I need a break. So like he like.
I put him through.
He locked his show.
Last year.
I mean, it was very close to the wire. They shot the finale right after. I mean, he was flying. They shot on the Monday. I guess the Paris attacks happened on a Friday. They started production on Monday. He was flying on Saturday.
Wow.
I was talking to him as he was on his way to the airport because we were trying to figure out what we should do with that Sunday's episode. And he literally just locked his show either on Friday or on Monday of this week, and he took off to Hawaii. He should be sitting up here, so I'm going to try to.
Well, we hope
I'm trying to
he's
fill in the details
with a drink somewhere. But I was intrigued to know that he'd been asked on a number of occasions to speak on cable news programs as if he were an expert on these issues. And he was, of course, horrified that he would be perceived as an expert.
He totally resists that, but I mean.
But the fact that the show has that much
truthfully,
cachet,
he does know a lot, and I think
sure
he could add a lot more than a lot of people who have no compunction about like,
Right.
I'll raise my hand, I'll be an expert on cable news.
That's a
He
scary
probably
place
actually
right
knows
now.
a lot more than a lot of them because, but ultimately it's a job of storytelling and of synthesis, and he's not hearing the whole story from anybody. Nobody said there's going to be some big attack going on in European capitals, and they're going to shut down Brussels for 3 days. Nobody was saying that, but they're saying there's this, and so, and it's, I don't know, you hear every once in a while about the CIA or the NSA bringing Hollywood writers to the CIA to try to like, what are the disaster scenarios? What are the bad things that can happen? And Alex and 6 other Hollywood writers sit around in a room, locked in a room for 3 months, and they came out with, I heard this crazy detail yesterday. I guess it was in the, maybe everyone read it. I think it may have been on the front page of the New York Times. But the idea that like Belgium has a law that you can't do a raid on somebody's private house between the hours of 8 p.m. and 5 a.m. So they knew where the guy who, Abdul Salam, one of the main guys, right. They knew where he was, but they had to wait until 5 a.m. the next morning before they could raid the house.
It's very polite. Yeah.
It's crazy. It's crazy. Like, it's
wow. I did
if
not know
Alex had posited that in a script, I would be like,
that's impossible. Well, he's done an amazing job at making it seem very real and very heartbreaking at the same time. We can't talk about Showtime this year without talking about your OTT service. And you've said that you want to remain premium throughout this process. And I'd love to know, how has this transition been challenging to you in ways that you didn't expect?
I mean, it's been it's what's made this year really exciting. And it's worked better than I expected, and we're still at the very early days trying to figure out. It's just strategically challenging because it's still Netflix is they've been in the business for 6 years maybe, and they're doing great. But it's new for us, and we're transitioning. We have a legacy business that is still really strong for us, still sort of at its, kind of all-time high. But this new stuff is really interesting and trying to figure out. So we've sort of approached it as we don't know yet what exactly the winner is going to be. So there's a few different ways to sell yourself. One is where you have a direct control of your customer, which is totally new to us. Matt Blank always says, we've been in the subscription business for, almost 40 years, but we've never actually had a subscriber because it's all sort of, their subscribers belong to somebody else. So we now sell ourselves directly through, Apple or Google, through the Google store. But we also are allowing Hulu to sell us. And as of a week ago, Amazon Prime is selling us. And that has worked really well, obviously, because those are, that's where people who really want to be streamed, who are already very accustomed to streaming, who are already used to paying, who want to pay an extra, $8 a month to get Showtime on top. That's worked really well. HBO has not done that. They've, I think they're very determined to have a direct, they don't want anybody else to get in the way of between them and their customer. And I think our attitude is
the coexist.
Yeah, let's see how it develops.
Right.
As long
You
as
are
pay us.
competing with them. I mean, they have original programming. Hulu has original programming. So is it?
But now I feel like I'm taking advantage of their original programming. So now I'm actually find myself, to some degree, it's just an interesting time. And I'm really glad that we've made that decision. It's worked sort of well for us. It's allowed us to grow very quickly. And, so certainly the Amazon Hulu relationships, that's definitely fishing where the fish are. Like people who want to stream, that's who their subscribers are. So there's we're not starting from scratch for that group. But, it's affecting everything. It's changing our, everything about our company. It's changing how we market ourselves. It's changing how we, we're becoming much more of a technology company. And we laid the groundwork for this really 4 or 5 years ago. And we started, hiring programmers and figure out how to do it. We're doing all the programming ourselves. Again, that's a differentiator with our competition. All the servicing, we're not going through Major League Baseball. We do it all ourselves. And there's like huge leaps and bounds kind of, so it makes it a very interesting time to be doing what we're doing. It's totally new for me. Most of it's happening in New York. I'm spending a lot of time, but every time I go to New York, I get my mind blown by something, and there's, obviously learnings about programming as well.
It's a big learning curve, I assume.
Yeah.
And on the creative side, how does your history as a producer affect the way you work with your showrunners? Because most people in your position don't have your history necessarily. I know you have very close relationships with Sarah Treem and Alex and everyone. You're very involved. How does it affect that?
I've been a producer. I've never been a writer. I've worked really closely with writers. And I think in general, I understand what their issues are, and so a lot of, executives want to advertise that they get out of the way of their, they give complete freedom to their creators. And I mean, I'm very clear that like they win in a tie, but in a disagreement, it's not their job to cater to my whims. But that said, I'll always have an opinion. I understand, and I think it's our job. It's not, I say me, but it's really, we have a very tight group of programmers. It's Gary Levine and Amy Israel and Robin Gurney and Randy Runkle, and we engage really intensely with people and have a point of view, have an opinion, and I would say 90%, not all of them, the 10% who want to be left alone, you got to leave them alone. But 90% creative people want somebody to give me something useful, like tell me something I don't know, like, you know, they want to be challenged. They just want to make sure that, I think the only problem is if you're not making the same show, but once it's clear you're trying to make the same show and you got the same end, you know, they want feedback and they want, you know, somebody, you know, with opinions. And, you know, our programmers tend to have very close relationships, and they, you know, we're understaffed. We're sort of in some ways deliberately understaffed. We have, you know, there's the one or two people you're selling a show to, and those are the people you're going to stay with for the life of the show. Right. And I think it's a really good, invigorating, creative environment that, you know, is hard when the volume gets so much bigger, and, you know, but there's no factory feel. It's all very sort of handcrafted, and, you know, you're an editor and you've probably been edited, and you've had shitty editors and you've had good editors, and, you know.
But it is a revelation to see something in your own work that you know, you've been staring at something for months, and
right. A good editor is really valuable to you, right? Like, yeah. Do you hate them?
Sometimes.
Yeah.
But I appreciate the effort.
Do you hate them when they're right?
No, unfortunately.
You sometimes hate them even when they're right.
It depends who it is. It depends how they deliver their message,
That's
actually,
true.
I have to say. And if it's done in a way of respect and like sort of help me help you sort of mode, I agree with that. If it's slashing the paper with red and saying make this
you can't get away with that. And we're working with, you know, we have the privilege of working with some of the most talented writers and some of the most talented storytellers in the world. So it's not like, let me tell you how to write your script.
If they've made it this far, they are clearly good storytellers.
You know,
but
a degree of humility is necessary. You know?
On both sides.
Yeah, but I mean, particularly on the sort of executive side, a degree of humility is essential. But it doesn't mean, you know, you have to be bowing and scraping either.
Right.
You know?
And you mentioned The Affair earlier, which I think has, I mean, I don't know if you can reinvent a show after 2 seasons, but I feel like it's a very different show. It's bigger, the story is, we're seeing more of the different characters. And did you work with Sarah Treem? She was a first-time showrunner. This was new to her, and she's been very open about, like, you know, teach me, tell me what you think this should be. But after season 1, which I think was kind of divisive for people, did you sit down with her before she started writing and said, this is how I think we
It wasn't like
can
there's like a big old sit down. Like, the engagement is pretty constant. So we're constantly talking. We're talking about every outline and every script and every cut. So it's an ongoing process. I mean, I try to avoid that, like, you know, come in, haul you into the principal's office, and so let's have a serious conversation. It doesn't work that way. It's a much more sort of ongoing engagement. But the thing was, one of the things that's gotten simplified this year, which has nothing to do with us. Again, I mean, most of it is, 90% of it is Sarah, you know, in combination with the writers who are around her, coming to these conclusions. But last year, it had the sort of double twist of it's you know, it was always going to be a point of view show. We're now in her point of view, we're in his point of view. But it had the extra twist of this is what they're saying to you know, to a law enforcement officer, to an interrogator. So is that what he would really say? What I just saw, is that what he would really say as he's trying to exonerate himself in front of the cop who's interviewing him? So it added this extra level of complication and an extra place where people could cry bullshit and complain. Oh, I don't buy that. And one of it was just the simplification of what you're watching now. This is Noah's point of view. This is Alice's point of view. This is Maura Tierney's point of view. And it wasn't all driven by how they would shade their behavior to a cop. So it got much simpler, and I think a truer version of itself. And you know, certainly expanding the show. I'm always pushing to expand, and I think, you know, you'll see changes again. You know, I'm always, you know, again, like, sometimes to a fault, we change our shows a lot between years. And, oh, can't you go back to what I loved about it last year? And you're going to eventually piss some people off. Like, I liked it before, but, you know.
But then they grow to like the new iteration.
Then they grow to write the new iteration.
Right.
And so Homeland, you know, there's a new discovery every year. And I like to be, you know, if you want to be unpredictable, you got to be willing to risk, you know, pissing some people off or disappointing some people or trying something that doesn't work perfectly. I mean, television is such a medium of imperfection. You got to sort of embrace the imperfection. It's not, you know, it's not a play, it's not a movie, it's not closed-ended, it's always evolving. So you got to sort of like, I say that to actors who like are freaking out about it. A particular script. I don't know how to play this, you know, this script, this show is going to be a disaster. It's like, you got to embrace the uncertainty of television. You know, you write yourself into a hole in episode 6, and maybe episode 7 will be kind of disappointing, but then, you know, you bring it back around, and you gotta learn to love that part of the medium.
For sure. And before we go to audience questions, I had a couple things I needed to get to. The first is documentary and sports. We don't have a lot of time, but this week we announced, or you rather, I read it, the Circus. I feel so ingrained in all of this. The Circus, a new docuseries about our current circus, which is our political climate.
Right.
Just tell me a little bit about the format of that and the access you're going to be able to get to our candidates.
Well, speaking of embracing the unknown, we don't know. I mean, no one has promised us a red carpet inside, but you never know, and that's.
Will we see Trump in the show is really what I'm asking.
I believe you will. I'm less concerned about access to Trump than I am to Hillary.
Yes, he seems to be open to it.
Yeah, I think, you know, that should not be a problem. Nobody has more, I think there's no political reporter has more access than Mark Halperin and John
They're
Homeland.
a great team.
I mean, I've known those guys. I mean, I've known Mark. Mark and I played high school basketball together.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I've known
That's
Mark
great.
for since going back to high school. And those guys have, I think, the right tone. First of all, they've written the definitive books of the last 2 elections, Game Change and Double Down. You know, people talk to them, and there's a trick in documentaries. Once you get a few people in, and people don't want to be left out of the story. And so you
Right.
count on that competitive pressure to get people to let you in. And if, you know, I think we can guess the candidates who are going to be more open, and those are going to be less open.
Right.
But if the candidate's not going to be there, then, you know, I'm happy to. I think it's going to be really fascinating to watch the people running the campaign manager, and the low-level staffers, and the advance team, and the traveling circus of the press,
The
and
social
I think
media
the whole
coordinators.
thing. And it had the feeling for a long time. Like, I mean, Randy works on a lot of the. Randy Runkle did the show we did with San Francisco Giants and the Florida Marlins. We did with Major League Baseball, and we did a similar show this year, which I thought was even better, the season with Notre Dame football. And that was better because they're college students, and they give you, they're much less guarded and protected than a professional baseball player. So I've always wanted to do that kind of show, but do it about something other than sports. And so like the 2016 election is like, it's totally irresistible. And I think the same dynamic will hold where, you know, the candidates and the people at the top will be really guarded. Although, if we're covering Marco Rubio, does Ted Cruz really want to be left behind? I don't know.
I think we know the answer.
You know, and if the professional athletes who are the candidates don't want to be covered, I bet the college students who are the people on the campaign will be. And in any group of people, there's somebody who wants the FaceTime, somebody who wants the credit, and you turn the cameras on. And that's the other difference between print and film. On camera, people reveal themselves, even if they're trying not to. I think it's going to be awesome. And I think it's really different. My goal is to do, you know, a guided tour. It's going to be guided by Mark, John, and Mark McKinnon. Mark McKinnon is the guy you see him a lot on, you know, his trademark is his 10-gallon hat. He was a he was a Bush guy, a Bush staffer, like, a campaign guy, not staffer. So it would be a guided tour, but I wanted to be really verite. It's not talking heads, there'll be no studio, a little crazy documentary, like what can we get that week? And I expect these guys to break news. I think they will break news.
So it'll be filmed in real time?
It'll be filmed in real time. And you do the thing where you're filming all week, you develop you get a half of a cut by Thursday, you get a slightly finer cut on Friday, you lock it on Saturday, and then you air it a day or two later, air it on Sunday or Monday, and I don't know, could be watching paint dry. I read some of the comments yesterday. It was like, I'd rather watch paint dry, but I don't think it will be.
I'm feeling that won't be the case. And then in the sports arena, for lack of a better term, you had a huge win this year with The Fight in May, which was a co-partnership with HBO. Just tell me a little bit about how the two of you can coexist in that world.
Well, it was the only way it could happen. Floyd was absolutely against it, and
really, why?
This is like deep history. If you know anything about boxing, doesn't like Aram, doesn't like HBO, and Floyd was holding the cards, and it was really Les Moonves who made it happen. He really pushed and used a lot of capital and a lot of time and attention and energy. And he made it happen. Because the hardest part, bringing HBO and Showtime together was not that challenging. The hard part was bringing.
The party photos on Instagram looked fun. So
yeah.
Everybody was getting along.
Yeah, we had a joint party, and it was actually a really fun party. But the hard part was bringing Floyd and Aram together, and that was where political skills.
That sounds like a documentary into itself,
yes,
right there.
We definitely, if we'd covered it, they wouldn't have let us. But if we covered it, that would have been a good show.
And then finally, probably the reason everyone's here, what is going on with Twin Peaks, and when can we see it? And you've been to the set.
I've seen it. I haven't
You've
seen the show. I've seen
You've been there.
I've seen some minutes of film.
And what are your impressions so far?
I'm sworn not to overhype. I'm trying to think of
It's a safe
how did
place,
how
you
did
don't have to worry.
JJ and Bob Iger handle these questions leading into Star Wars?
So diehard
I'm
fans of the
pleased
series,
with what I've seen so far.
how will they
I think
feel?
it's going to be awesome. I think it's going to be incredible. Just seeing a little bit of film.
Is cherry pie stock going to just go through the roof again?
There might be some cherry pie.
But you're closely guarding the set, and that's on purpose, obviously.
Yeah, David is closely guarding the set, and
As he should.
and he wants to do it his way. And but you start seeing the characters come to life, and you're like, oh my God, it's definitely you're in the hands of a master. So.
Very good. Well, perfect segue to audience questions. We probably have time for 2 or 3. Anybody wants
All right,
to ask?
talk to
No, that's why we're here, to hear you. Sir in the back.
Yeah, hi David. Music programming on Showtime. You guys have done, obviously, the Eagles documentary, which was fantastic. The documentary about the Bob Dylan lyrics that got reinvented in the studio. Can you talk a little bit about Showtime's attitude towards music programming?
We like it, and music documentaries have done really well for us. We're doing more, something we're working on right now that I think will be really big in 16 if it all comes together. And the other thing is roadies. The challenge with music in general, and I tend to prefer, I think it's actually justifiable in terms of ratings and popularity, but it's also, my predilection. I'm more interested in the sort of, not the concert film, but more the sort of about the creative process. And I think that works better, my bias is that a concert is never as good on film as it is when you're there. And it's always going to be limited to the super fans of whoever that band is. A music documentary can go beyond the super fans. You know, the Eagles documentary worked really well for us.
And you bought that at Sundance, right?
Yeah, and I think that we actually gave some funding for it before it was done. We actually bought it well before Sundance. The Eagles worked well, I think, because it was like, holy shit, those guys are talented. Like, and you realize, like, you know, yeah, we all kind of know Eagles songs, but
Yeah.
when you actually watch the film and you realize, like, what good singers, what good songwriters, what good, you know,
But the
musicians.
drama, too, was great.
Yeah, so that worked really well. Roadies, you know, is, you know, it's Cameron Crowe doing what you love Cameron Crowe to do. And I think, you know, that should feel very authentic to that world. And there's going to be a huge music, obviously it's about the music business, but there'll also be a big music component to the show. And, you know, musicians, old and young, new and classic, kind of commingling in the world of that show. So music can be, I guess the short answer is music can be very divisive and very narrow, but if you do it right, you can open up to the, you know, it can actually be very universal.
Great. Anyone else?
Two-part question. One, which characteristics or qualities do you look for when you are being pitched a new show, and what separates the yes from the no that you would pursue?
I mean, I think for me, I'm always looking to be surprised. I'm looking for the unexpected, something I haven't thought of, something I haven't heard before, something I haven't read before. Somebody hits me with like, wow, I never thought about it that way. And it can be an original idea, or it can be, you know, a cop show, but with a, you know, with an approach that seems completely different than anything I've ever seen before. So I would say the ability to like surprise me is like probably the single most important. You're looking for a writer that's, you know, you can tell when it's coming out of somebody's gut, like it's coming from somewhere inside. So part of what I'm always kind of reading is like, what's the idea behind the idea, i.e. like, where did this person come up with it? Where did, you know, what does it mean to them? Like, why is this person pitching us this show, you know? And you can kind of like feel there's something like deep and original there. And then, you know, you want to be able to, last thing is I think you want to allow your listener to imagine the series. You don't have to pitch the entire series, but I want to be able to imagine the good version of the series. So I imagine, like, you know, you want your listener to be able to sort of project where the series might go, what the good version of it. Can I see this show winning an Emmy 3 years from now? And I've frequently bought things. I don't think this guy's really going to be able to deliver, but if he did, it'll be worth it, you know. And I'll frequently, you know, that will get to a yes. If like I feel like probably not, but there's at least a chance that this person is going to be able to do something great and original, you know. And then there are other times where you hear like, even the best version of that show is not a show I want to watch, or not a show that I can see programming, and then you pass.
And I have a follow-up on that note. Something very important is the diversity question. And how are you making sure that diverse voices are able to pitch? And how are you making sure that you have diverse directors and everything that now everyone's being held accountable for in a way that even like 3 or 4 months ago, people were not talking about it to the degree they are now?
It's a challenge, and the thing that is ultimately the most important to me is you know, one leads to the other, but the goal is the end product, so that you're putting out shows into the world, and you're putting programming into the world that will have diverse appeal and you know, explore the unexplored, you know, give voice to the unvoiced, and so that, you know, that's the goal. So there's like the one is a means to the end. So letting people with diverse life experiences pitch or direct or act is the means to the end, which is the programming that we put out into the world. It's a huge challenge. I'm well beyond any kind of like easy answers.
Do you see the main challenge being on the agency side not having access to
No, it's
the
so
voices,
systemic. It's so, it's not like I can say, oh, it's the agents, or it's like, it's about developing talent that can succeed, developing talent that is going to be good enough to put a show on. But you never know. I didn't know that I didn't really know Sarah Treem. I didn't know that she would be good enough. It became clear fairly quickly that there was something special there. But, Alex Gonza had a lot of experience with. Sarah Treem I had no experience with. Right. And I think that's true for our executives, too. I don't think anybody at Showtime. What did it say? Chirac? Yeah, well, that's a single example of a pilot that we're making right now that Lena Waite wrote. Again, somebody I didn't really know. Lena Waite, people now know her.
Master of None, right?
People now know her because she's, she's on Master of None. She's the African-American, braided lesbian, Aziz's friend. But she wrote a great script, but that was a case of, I don't know. I actually don't know exactly how it came in, but somewhere between Gary Levine and Robin Gurney read a script that had been developed by Common and Aaron Kaplan, and then it was like, what do we think about this script? I want to make some changes to the script and work with her a little bit, and like, she's got chops.
Well, that's great.
And it's a show, but the point about it is it's a show about the South Side of Chicago, where Common's from, where Lena's from. So they knew what they're talking about. And I mean, I was the recipient of something somewhat, pretty polished. Lena came in and said, I want to do this show. I have no idea what I would have said. And she didn't have to pitch it to me. And it would, whether she would have been able to communicate in a pitch. She's a good talker. She's funny. She's like charming. You can see that on the show. So she's got skills in that area. But who knows? If she had just sort of said, I want to do this show, whether about, growing up, South Side of Chicago, gun culture, and sort of the interweaving, whether we would have said yes or no off a pitch. Never know. She wrote a great script, and then you're arguing over how good is the script, how good can she make it, and then it's much more concrete. I don't know. I'm not really answering your question because it's
a big question.
It's a big question. It's something we wrestle with all the time. There's
but I think you guys
a moral imperative and a business imperative to do it better. I mean,
you have been great on the director front, I have to say. Leslie being an EP on Homeland.
Well, we do well with certain. We've done very well with women.
Nurse Jackie was a great example of super diverse behind the scenes and on the camera.
I mean, I can say that our writing staffs and our creators were very balanced gender-wise. And, some shows lean more male, some shows, I'm just talking about in the writing, but we're fairly 50-50 in terms of non-white voices. We haven't done that well, and we got to do better. And it's a topic of a lot of conversation. Chirac is one shot at it, but it's I don't know.
Well, all you can do is give people a chance.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, that's a heavy note to end on, but you did a wonderful job. Thank you so much.
Sorry, guys.
No,
thank you.